This video is brought to you by Poolonomics. Pool closing kits are one of the most redundant products in the pool industry. In this video, we'll go over why this is the case and what alternative you should consider when closing your pool. Let's start from the top. Most pool closing kits provide things like shock or oxidizer to sanitize and break down combined chlorine, as well as algaecide to protect against algae. Many kits also provide anti-stain to deal with metals in your water, as well as antifreeze to prevent water freezing in your plumbing lines. Some kits even go as far as throwing in things like anti-scale to counteract high calcium levels, enzymes to reduce the load on your chlorine, and even random accessories like floaters and sponges to sweeten the deal. But most of these products are either cheap, subpar variants of what you should be using, or just completely unnecessary for closing a pool. We'll kick things off with shock and oxidizer. Most closing kits give you non-chlorine shock because it's generally safer to use and less harsh on vinyl and fiberglass pool surfaces. While this might seem like a sensible decision on the manufacturer's part, especially because they don't know what type of pool their customers will have, non-chlorine shock is still considerably less effective than chlorine shock. In fact, non-chlorine shock isn't even a sanitizer, it's an oxidizer, only able to break down and oxidize non-living contaminants such as sweat, saliva, lotions, and sunscreen. That means it can't kill algae, and it can't break down combined chlorine, which makes it a very poor choice for a winter close. What's more, you can in fact use regular chlorine shock in any type of pool, as long as it's properly diluted before adding it to your water. That means the risk is far more dependent on user handling rather than what type of pool surface you have. With that in mind, if you already use chlorine shock as part of your maintenance routine, you probably already have this chemical on hand without having to rely on a kit to provide it. Next, we'll cover algaecide. A lot of pool owners like to dump algaecide into their pool before covering up for the winter. While this isn't necessarily a bad idea, it's not actually required if you have a chlorine pool because chlorine is far more effective than algaecide at preventing algae. Algaecide simply adds a fallback layer of protection against algae, and one that typically only comes into play if you fail to follow the proper closing procedure for a pool. With that being said, algaecide plays a more important role in a non-chlorine pool because other sanitizers typically aren't as capable of defending against algae, at least not for a sustained period. But even if you do choose to use algaecide, closing kits don't always give you the most optimal type. Some kits include a metallic algaecide, along with anti-stain to counteract the additional copper being introduced to the water. This is a cost-cutting measure and it adds more risk to you with no practical upside. For closing a pool, 60% polymer algaecide, often called Polyquat 60, is widely considered the best. It works against most types of pool algae and won't cause metal staining because it doesn't introduce more copper into your water. Okay, let's move on to anti-stain. High metal content in your water can cause metal staining on your pool surfaces, and by using anti-stain, otherwise called metal sequestrant, you can clump the metal particles together to prevent them from depositing on your pool. However, you only need to worry about metal staining if your pool has a high metal content upon closing, or if you're using a metallic algaecide that will ultimately add copper to your water. If you don't have too much metal in your water, you're not at risk of metal surface stains, and there's no benefit to using stain prevention products in your pool. If you do happen to be using a copper-based algaecide, you will need to pair it with metal sequestrant to counteract the increase in metal, which, as mentioned, is why you often see both products bundled into a pool closing kit. With that being said, we still don't recommend this pairing because the more effective the sequestrant, the less effective the algaecide becomes. It's a fight you're never truly going to win. Next, anti-scale. Just like with metals, high calcium content in your water can lead to calcium stains forming on your pool surfaces. Anti-scale, sometimes called scale inhibitor, keeps excess calcium dissolved in your water when it would otherwise crystallize and precipitate out, causing cloudy water and eventually calcium scaling. Again, this only applies if your calcium hardness level is too high, which is something you should correct before closing your pool anyway. Overall, rebalancing is always better than trying to manage an imbalanced pool. If there was ever a band-aid solution to a pool chemistry problem, using a scale inhibitor is undoubtedly it. Okay, so what about antifreeze? Well, when you close a pool, one of the most crucial steps is blowing out and plugging your lines to prevent the pipes from freezing up. If done correctly, there should be no water in the lines, which means they can't freeze over. The only reason you would want to use antifreeze is if you're not confident in your ability to blow out the lines, making it more of an insurance policy to hedge against human error than anything else. If using antifreeze in your pool helps you sleep at night, by all means, go ahead and use it. For most pool owners, though, it simply isn't necessary. Now let's quickly touch on enzymes. Some pool owners use enzymes to help break down and oxidize organic and non-organics in the water, effectively reducing the load on chlorine. This sounds good in theory, but it's a lot more expensive to use enzymes alongside chlorine compared to just using more chlorine. Where a case can be made in smaller bodies of water, like hot tubs, it simply doesn't make sense for a swimming pool. Finally, we can't forget about accessories. Closing kits will occasionally try to win you over with extra pool equipment, like chlorine floaters and absorbent foam sponges. Some even come packaged in fancy boxes or carrying cases to really make a statement. Of course, none of this makes any difference when it comes to winterizing your pool the right way, and it certainly won't be the deciding factor in opening a clean and clear pool. While these little freebies can make you feel like you're getting a good deal, they're just gimmicks that offer very little to the pool closing process. Okay, so if closing kits are a waste of money, what should you buy instead? Well, the best approach is to identify the few chemicals and accessories you actually need for closing your pool, and buy them individually. For almost everyone watching this video, that means lots of chlorine and a dash of algaecide for peace of mind. Seriously, that's it. For those using alternative sanitizers like bromine, simply swap out the chlorine for your chosen sanitizer and be sure to use plenty of algaecide. Overall, shocking and balancing the water is 90% of the work during a close. The rest depends on the temperature of the water, how much water you drained from your pool, and how effectively you blew out the lines to prevent freezing. So, there you have it, everything you need to know about pool closing kits, why they aren't worth your time or money, and why buying individual chemicals is the way to go. Check the description below for links to our full companion article, along with supporting articles for many of the points discussed in the video. We also have a free downloadable and printable checklist to help with your pool maintenance schedule. You can get it for free at poolonomics.com/checklist. That's all from us. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for all things pool care.